We're talking to Chip Douglas here. You mentioned that Mike Douglas. You mentioned that Mike Nesmith came along, had seen you with the Turtles, obviously had been following your career, and he basically talked you into being the producer of the Monkees. Now, you'd written songs for folks. You'd obviously been playing music for a long time. Had you had a lot of producer experience?
I'd had virtually none. And he said, "Don't worry, I'll teach you everything you need to know. Just trust me, it'll work out and it'll be fine." So I said, "Are you sure?" And there I was thrust into a kind of a pretty big thing. It was like Don Kirshner described it. It's like we're offering you a percentage of the Beatles here. It's that big. They're selling, a couple of 3 or 4 million albums each time they put something out. Of course, because they have that TV show and they had hit records. Now, Headquarters and Pisces, Aquarius, Capricorn, and Jones, they didn't quite do as well as some of the other records. I mean, they have by now, but at the time, there was no single with either of these records. It was just an album, and nothing on the Headquarters album had a single with it, so it kind of was not the same sales-wise as some of the earlier ones, which had all, Clarksville and, I'm a Believer and all of these things with it. Later, we did Daydream Believer, which became a hit single and my first as a producer, but it was not included in the albums that I did. It went into the subsequent album, which was after I was not included anymore in the production sort of a thing.
That's a Daydream Believer is a Jon Stewart song. Was that a song that you had found being in that world, or?
He was a friend of mine, and he sang that song for me one night, and I thought, wow, this is great, so maybe I'll play it for the Monkee guys and see if, something develops there. And Davey loved it, and so we went in and did a track and cut it, and I added some horn parts, which Shorty Rogers arranged for me, and I'd begun working with him at the time to do horn and overdubs and that sort of a thing. So, and he did some nice trumpet parts on there that really kind of gave it a little sound, just a couple of accents in the horn parts that were really nice, that made the record happen. So
it was right about this time, though, that the Monkees were sort of fighting this correct perception that they didn't play on their records, and somehow that was a disgrace. It sort of seems funny now when no one cares who plays on records, basically, but this sort of idea that they didn't have credibility with the hip people because they didn't play, and so they wanted to make records that they actually played on and wrote the songs for. Do you think that was a mistake of them to try to go that way?
I don't think you could call it a mistake, but it was just something they had to do just to show everyone that they could actually play their own instruments, because they were up against the Beatles, played their own stuff, and the Byrds played on all their records, and the Yardbirds played on their records, and everybody, and the Animals were a band, and they were just embarrassed, or Mike was the most embarrassed about the other. I think Peter maybe cared a little bit too that he did, because they were the musicians in the group, and Mickey and Davey didn't really kind of care that much whether somebody else played on the records or not, but Mike really did. He was that upset him, and he was able to use his own outfit when he'd do his songs, but he always had to kind of argue with Don Kirshner about it, and he just didn't really have a free creative hand to do what he wanted. So when I did this album, Headquarters, I was thinking, oh boy, we've done it now, and we're going to see the headlines in the newspaper tomorrow. Monkees play their own instruments at last. But no, the album came out, and nobody even blinked an eye. But they're now playing their own instruments. Hello, everybody. But I guess it didn't work that way. But it's a charming little homegrown type of thing, the Headquarters album, and it's really all them. Mickey on the drums, and Davey on the tambourine, and Mike on the pedal steel, and I played bass through a lot of it, and Peter played on some of them, and Peter played keyboard on other things, and 12-string, and so it's them.
Yeah, it's a great album, and there's your great song "Forget That Girl" is on there.
Well, thank you. It's that was like the only song I'd written at the time, maybe one of two. Wish I'd had. I got a lot more nowadays that I would like to see them do. You never know. We may get together and do something again one day.
As four guys go, as bands go, how functional or dysfunctional were the Monkees, those four guys?
Well, they were very, very focused and determined to do this project when in the Headquarters album. But once that was done, they began to kind of scatter into, as even the Beatles did, into four different kind of organizations. Mike had his approach, Mickey had his people, and Peter had his people, and Davey had his friends, and each one of them began to form this little backup group of their own, and where they were in control of what they did, and they were doing their songs, and so on and so forth. And so that after Pisces and stuff like that, you'll see on the Birds and the Bees and the Monkees, there's more of the thing where each guy has his own little backup band doing the tracks and stuff. So it fragmented a little bit, you could say. It's like a meteor streaking through space, and all of a sudden, just before it hits the ground, it busts up into four different pieces,
Like a little bit more like the White Album.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. Although the Don Kirshner approach, I think, is a little bit crass, I think he sort of supplied them with great songs. He had that pipeline to that old school publishing thing. And Pleasant Valley Sunday is a Goff and King song that you produce, and you play that fantastic bass part on it. How was the song presented to you or to the band?
Well, it was a demo, a little bit slower tempo, and I haven't listened to it in about a year, but a fellow sent me that demo. I think it was Andrew Sandoval from Rhino. And I heard the original Carole King demo. It was in a different key because Carole sang it in a different range. And for some reason, I began to fiddle with it up at my place in Laurel Canyon, and I kind of got it into the key of A, thinking of Mickey singing it, and it became faster, and I made up this guitar intro to it, and I presented it to them as something I played on the guitar, as I recall. We may have listened to the demo too, but I was just kind of suggesting, let's do it in this key, and Mickey, you sing it, and then we kind of put all the rest of the harmony parts and stuff together as we went, and got Mike up there doing a high harmony. It's really, it's an interesting thing as I listen back, because you really hear each guy doing a harmony part somewhere in there, and, that was my criteria with the Monkees. It wasn't so much that, we had to play our own instruments at that point. We did have Eddie Ho, who was a friend of mine, and he played drums on it, because Mickey at the time wasn't that great a drummer. His tempo was kind of up and down, so he was okay with having somebody else sit on the drums and do the drum part. So I played bass on it, and I think maybe Bill Chadwick played the rhythm guitar, and Peter played a piano part, and I think Mike eventually did all the leads on it. I taught that little lead part to him, and he overdubbed that part and stuff like that. So, but my point was that my criteria was, you got to just hear only the Monkees singing on these records, with a couple of exceptions. We did something called Going Down, or it was some no time at all, and we had all the Friends came and sang on that background chorus. But generally, I would want to hear, just whoever singing lead, and, Mike over there on that harmony part, and then you'd hear Peter over there on the left on that harmony part, and Davey singing that little thing. And so, to me, what worked really great with the Monkees was one guy singing a lead with another guy on top doing a harmony part, and that was kind of my edict. I like that type of harmony. It's like a country approach to music, and I hear so many bands nowadays that have that approach going. They got one guy, and then they got another guy that sings harmony to them, and it sounds really great to me. It's like the Beatles, that you had two voices, and it really made it neat sounding.
Yeah, and some great records that are played on the radio constantly.